Welcome to FolkFear, a place where forgotten villages remember too much, where rituals echo louder than prayers, and the dead do not rest until stories are told. Tonight, we follow the slow drift of cursed water. We walk beside a river that does not flow, but hungers. A river that has swallowed brides, vows, and secrets older than the land itself. They say its current carries ashes, ashes of promises burned, ashes of a love forbidden, ashes of a girl whose name is whispered on the wind and never spoken aloud. This is not just a ghost story. This is a warning. So light a candle, sit close, and do not look at your reflection until the tale is done. This is the story of the Ash River Bride, a haunting folk horror tale, only here on FolkFear.
There is a river that no longer appears on most maps. It runs like a thread of forgotten ink through a region of hills where the fog never fully lifts, where birds refuse to nest, and where the villagers, those who still remain, speak in lowered voices after dusk. They do not name the river anymore. They only call it, or her, or the edge. But once it had a name. Ash River, a name whispered not in reverence, but in resignation, as if to name it was to call it closer, as if the river might listen and respond. And it did, because the Ash River, they say, remembers names. The old women tell it best. They sit on splintered porches or around cracked tea bowls, their voices low and trembling, not from fear, but from respect. They say the Ash River doesn't forget what it's been given, that it keeps every name ever whispered to it, every vow ever broken beside it, every tear and every bit of ash. They say it carries those offerings, not to the sea as other rivers do, but in circles, eddies of grief that never leave, never dissolve, just whirl and wait. Long ago, there was a girl, and long ago, she drowned. No one knows if she slipped or was taken, or if she simply walked into the water with her eyes open and her mouth closed. But after that, the river began to whisper names. Not aloud, no. You wouldn't hear it like a voice on the wind. You wouldn't hear it with your ears. But some did hear it. In dreams, in fever, in the quiet moments just before waking, a name that meant something to them, a child's name, a lover's name, their own. And always, after the whisper, came the disappearance. First it was a goat, then a boy, then two girls who were said to walk too close to the banks, giggling, daring. The village grew silent. Doors closed earlier. No one went to the river without reason, and no one went alone. But grief, as it always does, finds its way to the water. On a moonless night, not so many years ago, a mother carried a bundle to the water's edge. She moved quietly, barefoot, her dress wet around the hem. She did not weep. Her grief had already dried inside her like old rice. The bundle was small, wrapped in white, burned black at the edges. Her daughter had died that morning, a fever that came fast and left faster, stealing breath and voice, leaving only stillness. There was no money for a proper burial, no priests to chant. The village's shrine had long since crumbled into rot. All she had was the river, So she walked, and when she reached the bank, she unwrapped the bundle, took a fistful of ashes, and let them fall. They clung to her skin, they drifted out slowly. And in the silence that followed, the river spoke, not in words, but in something older, something colder. The mother stood still, then knelt, then whispered a name. Not her daughter's, not her own. A name that had not been spoken in decades. A name the river had not forgotten. And the moment it left her lips, the wind stilled, the current paused. And the moon, though hidden behind thick clouds, cast a pale glow across the surface. In that glow, something moved. Not a fish, not a branch, but a figure, white, hair streaming behind like silk in water, arms stretched outward. And the mother, grief-stricken, worn, trembling, smiled, as if she'd been waiting. Then, slowly, she stepped into the river, not once looking back. The next morning, the villagers found her shoes, neatly placed on a rock, her daughter's name carved faintly into the leather, and the water was quiet. But that night, the river began again. It whispered names, different this time, names no one had said aloud in years, names carved into gravestones long washed away, names unborn. The air grew colder, the ground softer, and from that day forward, the river was no longer merely a place. It became a memory, a mouth, a bride waiting at the altar with ashes in her bouquet. The ash river whispers still. It does not speak to everyone, only to those who are lonely, only to those who have given something they cannot take back, only to those who dare to love what the river already owns. And if you hear your name in its waters, run or kneel. Either way, you will belong to her, eventually.
They say she walks at dusk, not along the riverbank, but beneath it. Not swimming, not floating, walking. Her gown does not ripple, her veil does not lift. The water parts for her. Or perhaps it doesn't. Perhaps it simply accepts her. The first to see her was a fisherman named Old Way. He lived alone in a shack upstream where the river narrowed and the fog settled thick as soup. He'd fished the Ash River since before it was cursed, and stayed even when others left, some out of fear, others out of grief. Old Way had always scoffed at the stories. Rivers don't whisper, he'd say. They gurgle, they moan when clogged, but they don't speak. But one evening, his net tore. And when he pulled it in, tangled among the threads, was a scrap of silk, gray, wet, and frayed like lace. Not fishnet, not riverweed, a bridal veil. He stared at it for a long while, then threw it back. But the river didn't want to return it. Instead, it gave him something else, a glimpse. It happened as twilight bled into night. The lantern hanging from his post flickered, the fog thinned, and through the thinning mist he saw her, a woman in white, beneath the surface, walking calmly against the current, her bare feet brushing the stones, her veil drifting like seaweed around her face. She didn't float, she didn't struggle, she simply walked. Her head tilted slightly, as if listening,
Her hands trailed behind, fingers open, reaching for someone. And her face, oh, her face! Old Way never described it, only said her eyes were too open, too still. He stumbled back, his foot slipping on the wet dock. When he blinked, she was gone. And the river, silent once more, only lapped at his boots like it was laughing. He never fished again. By the next full moon, he'd left his shack and nailed shut the door. 2 weeks later, he was found dead in his nephew's barn, a noose of fishing net around his neck, and a single line carved into the wood beside him. She walks beneath us. But Old Way was not the only one. More sightings followed, always near dusk, always from the corners of the eye. Children claimed to see a woman standing upright in the shallows, unmoving, hair floating out in all directions like she'd been drowned for years. A dog belonging to the blacksmith's boy refused to go near the banks and howled each time the wind shifted east. Once, a teacher from the town beyond the hills came to sketch the river. He vanished on the third morning. His notebook was found open near the reeds, soaked with dew. The last drawing was of a face beneath the waterline, eyes blank, veil torn, mouth wide open in song or scream. They buried the book. No one touched the pencil. But it was the fourth disappearance that made the villagers whisper again. The boy's name was Lin, 15 years old, quiet, soft-spoken. He'd gone to the river to fetch water before supper. He never came back. They found his sandals at the shore, just where the path turned toward the rocks. And next to the sandals was a trail of wet footprints, leading not into the water, but away from it. 2 sets, one large, barefoot, the other small, slender, both fading after a few paces, like breath on glass. From that day forward, no one was allowed near the river alone. Children were kept inside. The elderly lit incense by their doors. The young were warned never wear white near the banks and never look into your reflection after sundown. But the river was patient. It did not need many, just one at a time. And always, always, she walked beneath the surface, waiting. The villagers gave her a name, not out of endearment, out of defense. To name something is to contain it, to give it shape. So they called her the Ash River Bride. They never said it out loud, only wrote it in salt across doorways, whispered it into old rice jars, buried it beneath lantern poles. The name floated among them like mist, and with it came the understanding. She was not a ghost, not a woman, not something to be pitied or prayed for. She was a memory given flesh, a vow never undone, and like all brides, she waited for someone. There was one last story told that year, passed between hands in the market and shared over bitter broth. A traveling merchant claimed to have seen a woman standing waist-deep in the water as he crossed the old stone bridge. Her arms were outstretched, her dress heavy with wetness, her veil dragging along the surface like a net. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the bridge, at the place where the lovers once jumped, at the spot where the lanterns used to be lit. The merchant turned away, but as he urged his cart forward, he heard his name, not spoken, whispered, breathed in the way only a river could, soft, fluid, chilling. And when he looked back, there was nothing there. Just water, just fog, just silence. The Ash River bride does not chase. She does not wail. She waits. And when the time comes, you will not run. You will walk, willingly, dreamily, into the water where she stands, because you will think you know her.
The girl's name was Nian. She was born in silence and raised beside the river that had swallowed her parents before she could speak a single word. The villagers said she had been found in a woven basket of reeds drifting near the old ferry crossing. The ferryman, too afraid to touch the water, used his pole to drag her in. When he lifted her out, her skin was warm, but her clothes were dusted with ash. Nian never spoke, not once. Not a cry as an infant, not a word as she grew. The village healer said her voice had been taken, perhaps by the same spirit that gave her back to the river. Others whispered that she'd been born of it, that when she breathed, the wind shifted, that when she blinked, the ripples changed. But she was kind, gentle, always helping, always near the water. Her eyes, dark as silt, seemed to listen to things no one else could hear. Every morning she rose before the sun and walked barefoot to the river's edge. She cast her nets for fish, cleaned the catch, and left an offering of rice on a flat stone where the current bent around the shore. Not for the gods, for the river. When the villagers asked why, she would smile faintly and trace her finger in the air, drawing a circle, as if to say, everything returns. One dawn, when the mist still clung low, she found something tangled in her net. It was not fish, it was fabric. A long, pale veil, heavy with water, smelling faintly of smoke. When she lifted it, black ash clouded the river's surface and drifted away in curls. The sight chilled her, yet her hands would not let go. She spread it out on the bank. The veil shimmered like a thing alive, threads of silver and gray, edges torn, but elegant too fine to belong to anyone from the village. And near its center, embroidered faintly in white thread, was a single word: bride. From that morning, the air around Nian changed. The wind seemed to follow her. The river grew restless. And in the evenings, when she sat near her small fire to mend nets, the flames flickered strangely, leaning toward the water, as if listening for something that breathed beneath it. That night, she dreamt of a wedding she did not remember. In the dream, the world was gray. The air was full of the scent of wet ash, and she was walking down a path of water. Men in masks lined the banks, their eyes hollow, their drums silent. She could not see her groom's face, only his hands, cold, skeletal, folded in prayer. As she reached him, the river rose behind her like a curtain. She lifted her veil, and beneath it, her skin began to crumble. Nian woke before dawn, her heart hammering, her hands clutching the soaked veil that now lay across her chest as if placed there by unseen hands. She threw it aside and ran to the river, panting, trembling. But the river was still. No ripples, no whisper, no trace of ash. She looked down at her reflection and saw another face beneath hers, faint and pale, smiling. When she blinked, it was gone. The next day, she tried to return the veil to the water. She pushed it into the current, watched it sink, disappear. But when she returned home that evening, it was there again, folded neatly at the foot of her bed, still wet. By the third night, the dreams returned. Each time clearer, closer, heavier with sound. The whisper of drums, the hiss of incense, the shuffle of bridal feet through mud. Then a voice, soft, weeping, familiar, calling her name, Neon. She had never told anyone her name aloud. No one knew what her parents had called her. The river had whispered it once, long ago, through the mouths of others, and now it whispered again. The following morning, Neon awoke to find footprints leading from her door down to the riverbank. Bare feet, small and delicate like her own, trailing water the whole way. But hers were dry. She followed them, her breath shallow, until they ended where the mist began. And there, upon the wet stones, the veil waited once more. It was no longer gray. It was white. Clean, pressed, ready. From that day on, people began to notice changes in her. She no longer joined the market at midday, no longer smiled at the children who waved as she passed. She began to wear white, thin, simple linen that shimmered faintly under the morning sun. And when she worked by the water, her shadow seemed to stretch farther than her body, as if another figure stood just behind her, mimicking every move. Some said the spirit of the first bride had chosen her as a vessel. Others said the river had simply called its child home. But no one dared approach her after dark. There is a kind of quiet that feels like being watched. That was how it became around Neon. Even in daylight, her cottage seemed too still. No birds landed on the roof, no cats prowled. When villagers passed, they'd hear faint murmurs from within, soft, rhythmic, like chanting beneath one's breath. And always, in the corner, that veil, hung now over the window like a curtain between the living and the dead. One evening, when a storm gathered over the hills, she stood at the water's edge, veil draped loosely around her shoulders. The river roared, heavy with rain, and lightning lit her face in stark flashes. She looked neither frightened nor sad, only waiting. A fisherman passing by swore he saw her raise her hand, palm outward, as if greeting someone standing just beyond the waves. When the lightning struck again, he saw nothing but ripples. By morning she was gone. Her door hung open, her nets lay folded neatly by the wall. And inside her cottage, carved into the wood of her bed frame, were the words, "She asked for her veil." For 3 nights, the river ran pale with ash. And on the 4th, a girl's voice, faint and melodious, was heard humming near the old ferry crossing. They say if you stand there long enough, you'll hear the whisper too, the soft murmur of a song without words, a song that sounds like a promise, a song that asks a question no one dares answer. For the veil is not gone. It drifts, waiting for the next hand to touch it, and when it does, the river will whisper another name. Tam was the lantern maker's son. His hands smelled of oil and ash, and he had eyes like kindling, quiet until touched, then warm, burning. Everyone in the village loved him, in that way people love a boy who never asks for more than he's given. He made lanterns that floated like souls across the river each year, carrying prayers, promises, and forgotten regrets toward the mouth of the current.
But Tam's heart was already tethered, not to a prayer, to a girl, to Neon. They'd never spoken, not once, not with words, but something passed between them in glances and gestures, in the brush of sleeves at the fish market, in the quiet nods at the edge of the path. Tam once left a crimson lotus lantern by her door. No name written, no mark. But when he returned home, he found a river stone, smooth, sun-warmed, placed on his windowsill. Neon could not speak, and Tam never forced sound from silence. Instead, he watched her from across the riverbank as she drifted closer to the water with each passing week, wearing white, hair growing longer, eyes distant, as if listening to something beneath the mud. He tried to look away. He could not. One evening, Tam's father summoned him. The old man, bent with age and soot, unrolled a faded scroll wrapped in red thread. "You are promised," he said, without meeting his son's eyes. "To whom?" "A girl from the southern village, daughter of the incense merchant. We owe their family a wedding, a favor for a favor paid in blood long ago." Tam's stomach dropped like a stone through ice. "I don't want her." The old man grunted. "It isn't about want." He pointed to the scroll. "It's about balance." Tam remembered the stories. Everyone did. How decades ago the Ash River flooded beyond its banks, swallowing cattle, huts, even a child. They said a lantern maker's ancestor had borrowed life in return for a vow, sealed not with ink, but with fire and ash. That if the vow wasn't honored, the river would collect what it was owed. The wedding was the final payment. Tam was the coin. But Tam was already spoken for, in spirit if not law. The thought of marrying someone else left his mouth dry, his breath shallow. He ran to Neon's cottage. The door was open, as it always was. She sat by the fire, veil draped across her lap, sewing needle in hand. She didn't look up. She didn't have to. He knelt beside her, trembling. "I'm to be married, but not to you." Still, she did not move. He reached out and touched the veil. Her hand shot out like lightning, gripping his wrist. And for a moment, the fire flared blue. Their eyes met. Tam felt something pull inside him. Not emotion, not desire, a gravity. He saw behind her eyes the echo of the wedding from her dreams, the drums, the masks, the groom with no face. He heard his own name, not spoken, but sung through water. He pulled away. "I love you." And with those words, the wind shifted, the river mooned, and the veil in her lap fluttered as if stirred by breath. That night Tam did not return home. He walked the riverbanks, pacing, breathless until dawn. He thought of running. He thought of stealing Neon away, of finding a place where names weren't whispered and veils didn't wait in silence. But the Ash River doesn't release what it has claimed. When he returned, the village was hushed. His father stood in the square, face pale, shoulders shaking. Tam's betrothed, the girl from the southern village, had arrived that morning, and just after crossing the bridge, her mother had walked calmly to the water's edge and stepped in. No cry, no struggle, only her bridal jewelry left behind, scattered like coins at a funeral. Her body was found later, wrapped in white, her hands folded in prayer, her eyes wide open, staring toward the bend where Nian once stood. The villagers began to murmur. Some blamed Nian, said her silence was a curse, said her veil had called the girl's spirit away. Others whispered of Tam, that his love had stained the wedding pact, angered the river, awakened something old. An elder spoke at the temple, hoarse and shaking. Two loves cannot live when the river waits. But no one listened. Tam's father locked away the scroll. The incense merchant left with a corpse, and the veil in Nian's cottage grew whiter. The next lantern festival approached. This time Tam made no lanterns. Instead, he carved a single one, plain, unpainted, its paper thin and trembling. He wrote two names upon it in ash, Nian, Tam. And at midnight he walked to the river and let it go. The lantern floated, but not downstream. It turned and drifted upstream against the current, as if pulled. He stared as it vanished into the mist, flame still flickering like a heartbeat unwilling to die. That night he returned to Nian's home. She was waiting by the window. The veil was gone, and her hair had been braided like a bride. When he stepped across the threshold, the fire blew out, and the river whispered his name.
The Lantern Festival came like it always did, with prayers on parchment and fire floating on water. Every year the villagers gathered by the Ash River under a sky heavy with stars and breathless with waiting. They lit their lanterns, whispered names, and watched their hopes drift downstream toward the bend, the place no one swam, no one fished, and no one crossed after dark. The tradition was older than memory, older than fear. They said the lanterns lit the way for ancestors. Others said they were offerings. But the oldest ones, the ones who remembered things no one should, called it something else, a pact, a promise to the river, that every name written, every flame lit, every vow made under moonlight would be kept, or the river would take what it was owed. This year, Tam did not stand with the others. He sat alone beneath the willow tree near the ferry crossing, where Nian's veil had first returned to her. The villagers gave him a wide berth, some out of pity, some out of fear. The groom who broke the ritual, the boy who chose love over debt. In the firelight, he looked older, haunted, but his eyes still searched for her. Nian had not been seen for 3 days. Her cottage stood open, her nets untouched, but the veil was gone, and beside her bed was a small clay bowl filled with ash. The villagers avoided it. They whispered that the wedding had already taken place, that she had married the river, and that now the bride was waiting for the groom to follow. At sunset, the villagers lit their lanterns. Soft hands pressed flame to oil-soaked wicks. Children whispered their wishes. Old lovers placed 2 lanterns side by side and sent them floating together. The river shimmered with gold and red, flickers of hope on the surface of something ancient. And then a lantern turned. It drifted against the current, not fast, slow, deliberate. It moved like it knew where it was going, like it had been called.
It brushed past the other lanterns, its paper nearly translucent, its flame pulsing like a heartbeat. Written on its side in soot and smoke, Neon, Tam. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tam stood. His chest tightened, his throat burned. He hadn't made that lantern, not this time. But it was his handwriting, his name, and hers. And the elder priestess stepped forward from the shadows. Her voice, brittle as dry leaves, echoed through the hush. A pact has been rewritten. Long ago, the river had claimed a debt, a bride from another village, a union to seal a blood promise, a marriage that was meant to keep the balance. But Tam had refused. He had chosen Neon, and now the river had accepted his new vow. Not because it was fair, not because it was pure, but because it was binding. Ash does not ask if the fire was just, it simply remains. The priestess approached Tam. Her eyes were clouded, but her voice was sharp. "You've promised her now. You've written the names." "I didn't—" She silenced him with a look. "The river doesn't care who placed the ink, only that it's sealed." She handed him a white ribbon, folded, damp, embroidered with a symbol he did not recognize. "Tonight, you must walk to the bend." He hesitated. Why? "Because the bride waits." Tam walked. Lanterns swayed on poles. The villagers parted as he passed. Some bowed their heads, others crossed their arms in silence. He did not speak. The ribbon in his hand felt heavier with each step, as if soaked with more than water. As he neared the bend, the sounds of the festival faded, replaced by something quieter. Not silence, something older. A humming, a breath, a memory spoken without words. She stood beneath the willow, barefoot, veiled, still. Neon, but also not. Her hair was the same, her eyes almost, but there was something deeper now, something that shimmered beneath her skin like river light on stone. She looked at him, and in that gaze was recognition, and longing, and sorrow. Tam stepped closer. He lifted the ribbon. She held out her wrist. He tied it gently, as if binding her to the world, or binding himself to what waited below. Behind them, the river shimmered. The lantern bearing their names circled in a slow loop, glowing hot white, until the paper split and the flame hissed into smoke. The pact was sealed, bride and groom. That night, a fog rolled in so thick that the villagers could not find their way home. The priestess poured salt across every threshold, and when the morning came, 2 sets of footprints were found on the riverbank, leading down into the water, side by side. But no bodies were ever recovered. Only a single veil, folded neatly on the flat stone by the bend, ash-streaked and dry. They say, if you write your name beside another's and send it drifting down the ash river, you'd better mean it, because love is not a promise in this place. It is a price. There is a place where even the bravest women refuse to go. A curve in the ash river, past the final house of the village, beyond the stone lantern that no longer glows. They call it Bride's Bend, not because brides walk there, but because they never do. In the old days, it was where young wives-to-be would come to cleanse themselves before their wedding rites. A sacred place, a gentle place, a place where water was believed to wash away sorrow and salt. But after the river changed, After the first veil was found in the net, after the names began to whisper from beneath the water, the tradition ended. No bride walked there again, not willingly. And yet, Neon walked there now, night after night, always alone, always barefoot, always veiled. Tam followed once, only once. From a distance, hidden behind the shadowed branches of dead plum trees, he watched her drift through the mist like a figure drawn in ink. She stepped across slick stones, her feet never slipping, her dress never tearing. When she reached the bend, she knelt by the water, then stood still for hours. Sometimes she tilted her head as if listening. Sometimes she held out her arms as if cradling something unseen. Sometimes she danced, slowly, one step, then another, as if following a rhythm buried deep beneath the current. Tam never spoke to her there. He didn't dare. Because Bride's Bend was not a place for words. It was a place of watching, a place of return, a place where something waited. One evening, when the fog came earlier than usual and the crickets fell silent, Neon did not come alone. A child saw it first. From the safety of the footbridge, he looked downriver and saw her walking, but not alone. Another figure walked behind her, unclear, pale, draped in white. No face, no feet, only shape. It did not follow, it mirrored. Every step she took, it took. Every tilt of the head, it echoed. When she stopped, so did it. When she raised her arms, the figure did too. As if Neon had become reflection and the river mirror. The boy ran home screaming. The villagers dismissed him at first. Children dream, children lie. But that night, no fire would stay lit past midnight, and the river hissed louder than usual, like steam escaping from stone. The next morning, a fisherman found bridle pins along the bend, old ones, rusted, some carved with names no one remembered. But one pin was different. It was new, delicate, wrapped in a strand of hair. Neon's. That evening, Tam confronted the priestess. She goes there, night after night. The old woman nodded. She must go. Why? Because the veil has chosen her. Because the river remembers. She's not a spirit. She's alive. The priestess looked past him toward the bend. Not everything alive belongs to the living. That night, Tam returned to Bride's Bend. He waited. Fog swallowed the trees, the wind pulled at his sleeves, and then she came. White, silent, distant. But this time, she was humming. A low melodic tune, not happy, not mournful, just endless. The kind of sound a river might sing in its sleep. He stepped forward, called her name. She didn't turn. He ran, stumbled, caught up just as she reached the flat stones at the bend. "Neon!" he whispered. She paused, then turned slowly, her veil lifting in the breeze. He saw her eyes. They weren't empty. They were full of memories not her own. Faces, brides, moments. Centuries of sorrow tucked into the folds of her gaze. "Come back," he said. "Please." She raised her hand, pressed her fingers to his lips, not to hush him, to mark him. When she pulled away, ash dusted his skin, and in her other hand she held the veil. Not the old one, a new one, stitched with a single name, Tam. The ground trembled, not with fear, with acknowledgement. The river accepted. And just behind Neon, where no one had stood a moment before, dozens of women began to appear, not walking, waiting. Their dresses were ruined, torn, some shredded beyond form. Their eyes were hollow, but not blind. They saw him, they saw her, and they nodded. Neon turned back to the water and stepped in. One foot, then another, as if nothing bound her to the earth anymore. Tam reached for her hand just once, but it slipped through his fingers like mist. She walked until the water reached her waist, and then she stopped. The veiled women behind her did not move. They only watched, like brides waiting for the music to begin, like memories waiting to be chosen. And Tam, heart broken open like clay in fire, whispered, "I will follow." But Neon only shook her head, once, softly, then vanished beneath the surface. Bride's Bend has never been the same. Grass no longer grows at its edge. No birds land near it. And when the fog thickens, those who listen closely say they hear dancing. Not joyful, not mournful, just endless.
All rivers go somewhere, but the Ash River does not end. It devours. Its mouth opens wide in a cleft of stone and reed where the land seems to fracture, not gently, but like something torn open. There are no boats beyond this point, no bridges, no crossings, just mud, mist, and memory. They call it the mouth, and it is cursed. The villagers used to fish there, used to plant rice along the nearby fields and tie prayer cloths to the trees to keep storms away. But no one walks there now, because the mouth moves. It grows. Season by season, inch by inch, the river eats more of the land. Its banks crumble. Its trees fall inward, roots torn and dangling like veins pulled from earth. Once, even a shrine was swallowed. Now, it is simply gone. No stone, no prayer bell, not even a name. The mouth of the Ash River does not let things return. The priestess knew this. Her name had once been Meilan, though few remembered that now. She was the last of the river's watchers, a role passed from mother to daughter as long as anyone had memory, until one day no daughters remained, only her. It was she who first noticed the river eating faster, who measured how far the mouth moved each full moon, who watched animals stop drinking from its edge, and who, quietly, lit black candles inside her home, each one marked with a name the river had taken. Some names were old, some names were recent. One was still warm, Tom. She knew the river had accepted him, but it had not been satisfied. The veil had been offered, the bride had walked, the groom had followed, but the river wanted more. Because a pact made in love is softer than one made in blood, and the Ash River remembered both. On the first morning of the flood season, a boy disappeared. 10 years old, curious, last seen near the tree line picking wild berries for his sister. They found his shoes near the mouth. Inside them, pebbles and a faint trace of soot. The villagers didn't speak his name aloud, but at night they wrote it on their lanterns, and in the morning, those lanterns were gone, all of them. The river had taken them before they could float. On the 7th night, the wind changed. It howled not from the north, but from beneath the trees, as if the river itself was breathing. The priestess stood on her porch with a cane in one hand and a bowl of river salt in the other. She felt the shift, not in the air, in the bones of the village. The ground was growing wet, the walls were sweating, and the river, though far away, could now be heard from her doorstep, whispering like it once did only at the bend. She gathered the old ones, not the strong, not the brave, just those who remembered, and she spoke. The river is hungrier than before. The bride has returned, the vow has been renewed, but something beneath the veil was forgotten, and now the mouth opens for more than ash. That night it rained, but only by the river. The village sky remained clear, stars blinking, moon full. Yet from the mouth steam rose, as if the water boiled without fire, as if the land itself wept through the soil. A herdsman who wandered too close claimed to see something moving near the edge, not a body, a shape, crawling on all fours, pale, hair trailing like eelweed. When he returned, his fingernails had turned black. He cut them off in silence. On the 13th day, the river offered something back. A cradle, wooden, broken. Inside it, a veil, half burned. It floated upstream, stopping near the village dock. Nyan's name was carved on the side by no human hand. The letters were thin, scorched, as if singed into the wood by the breath of a forgotten god. The priestess took it and bowed, but she knew what it meant. The river was giving back its children, so it could take something older. On the first morning of the next season, the priestess visited the mouth for the first time in years. The fog was heavy, the ground slick, but she walked with purpose, her cane steady, her spine straight. At the mouth, she saw it, the water circling inward, not flowing out as it should, like a drain pulling at the world. And in the center, she saw veils. Dozens, hundreds, all colors faded, some white, some red, traditional for weddings long past, some black, wrapped around bones still intact. The veils floated in circles, like petals around an unseen drain. At the center of it all was Nyan, standing, waiting, holding the ash bowl in her hands. She didn't blink, didn't breathe. She only stared at the priestess, across the distance, across the mist. And she nodded once. The priestess dropped her cane. She understood. The river would not stop, not with one bride, not with one groom, not even with the children. Because the river wanted the memory itself erased, the origin, the first promise, the first broken vow. And that vow was carved into the land, the village itself. When the priestess returned, she did not speak. She sealed her home with salt, lit all her candles, and whispered a final prayer, not to save them, but to remember them, because forgetting is what the river wanted, and memory was now the only thing left untouched by the water. That night, the mouth widened. A whole acre of land collapsed in silence, and the mist swallowed it whole. No splash, no sound, just gone. And no one spoke of it the next morning, because somehow they couldn't remember what had been there. Long before the veil was found, long before Neon walked into the bend, there was another wedding. Not remembered by the young, not written in any temple scroll, but etched deep in the river's throat. The wedding that began it all. The one where the groom disobeyed. His name was forgotten, not lost, no, taken. But the elders once spoke of a time when two villages made a pact. One gave grain, the other gave brides. Each year, when the river receded, the two villages would meet at the shallows and perform a binding, a ceremonial union watched over by lanterns and the old gods who lived in water and wood. It was not for love, it was for balance. And balance, once disturbed, must always be repaid. This particular year, the chosen bride was from the west. Her name was Shen. Quiet, obedient, skin like porcelain soaked in moonlight. But her heart belonged elsewhere. She loved another, a boy named Leon, a river fisher's son with calloused hands and a reckless laugh. When the day came, Shen was dressed in red and veiled in gold. She stood at the banks, waiting for her groom to arrive from the eastern hill. He did not come. They waited until dusk. The lanterns dimmed. The drums stopped. And then a ripple spread across the river. At first, they thought it was the current, but then they saw her veil, floating, alone, blood-soaked. The girl had drowned herself, walking into the shallows in silence, not from grief, but from rage. They found her body curled beneath a cluster of reeds, her lips still moving, as if whispering to the water. Leon, the boy she loved, vanished the next day. Some said he fled, others said he followed, but the river never gave him back. And so a rumor began that he had been her true groom, her chosen. But he had not stopped her. He had let her walk. The river does not forgive betrayal in silence. It punishes in whispers. Years passed. The ritual was abandoned. The pacts dissolved. But the water had already remembered, and it would wait. Tam did not know this story. Not fully. But the priestess did. When he came to her one night, asking how to bring Neon back, her eyes did not soften. You can't. There must be a way. She's not gone. Then where is she? The old woman sighed. She is where all forgotten brides go, beneath the veil, beneath the surface, between the vows. Still, Tam refused. He returned to the bend each night, left offerings, rice, lotus seeds, coins rubbed in river ash. He recited vows into the wind. He folded lanterns in her name, and each morning he found them broken. Not stolen, not lost, shredded, as if by fingers that could no longer feel.
One night, he lit a single candle and placed it on the water, but it would not float. Instead, it sank slowly, flames still burning, until it vanished beneath the current. When he turned to leave, a voice, not loud, but clear, rose from the fog behind him. "You left her!" He spun. There was no one there, only a trail of wet footprints beside his own. That night, he dreamed of the wedding again, but this time he was the one standing alone, the groom, and in front of him stood not Neon, but Shen, the girl from long ago. Her dress dripping, her veil torn, she held out her hand, palm upward, and whispered, "Say the vow." He couldn't speak, his mouth filled with water. When he woke, his pillow was soaked, and in his fist, gripping tight even in sleep, was a single red bridal thread. The next day, Tam visited the priestess one last time. He didn't knock. She was already waiting. "You heard her," she said, without turning. "Yes." "She's testing you." "Who?" "The first bride." Tam stared at the floor. "She wants my vow. She wants your truth, your fear, your guilt. And if I give it, then the veil will decide." That night, Tam walked to the river's mouth. He didn't carry a lantern, no candle, no ribbon, only his voice. He stood on the edge of the crumbling land and shouted into the dark, "I loved her." The river stirred. "I still do." The mist shifted. "But I was afraid. I let her walk alone." The current pulled backward. "Take me now, not as a promise, as a price." The ground beneath him cracked. A hand emerged, pale, wet, reaching, but not for him, for the sky. Then it curled back and was gone. Tam waited. No veil appeared, no voice answered. But when he returned to the village, the door to Neon's cottage had reopened, and on her bed lay a single bridal ribbon, stained with soot, wrapped around an old ring made of braided reed. His. In the morning, the villagers found him asleep beside her fire, the veil draped across his shoulders. He was breathing, but in his sleep, he murmured a single name over and over. Not Neon, not Shen, but a name no one recognized. A name that may have belonged to the first groom, the one who disobeyed. Because the river doesn't take only names, it takes history. It takes the roots of forgetting and grows something haunted in their place.
It began the day the fog didn't lift. It clung low to the soil, pressed flat against rooftops, seeped through doors and under shutters. By noon, it hadn't burned off. By dusk, it had thickened. By night, it had shaped itself. Because when the villagers looked out past their windows, they saw movement in the mist. Not fast, not frantic, slow, purposeful. A line of figures, brides. Not alive, not dead, just walking. Single file, down the old cobblestone road that led from the river's mouth to the village center. No drums, no flutes, only the hush of cloth dragging across stone, of feet brushing dirt that no longer felt like earth. Their veils floated slightly above their shoulders, as if moved by breath the bodies no longer drew. They passed silently, one by one, dozens of them, each slightly different, one barefoot, one with rotted gloves, one with her mouth sewn shut by red thread. But they all had something in common: ash, sprinkled across their dresses, like snow that had fallen from a burned sky. The first to see them clearly was the baker's wife. She had stepped outside to bring in her laundry, the cloth still damp and cold. She froze, sheet in hand, as the first veiled figure drifted by. And though she swore it had no face beneath the veil, it turned to look at her. She dropped the sheet, stepped backward, did not scream, because the moment she opened her mouth, a thin line of ash fell from her lips. By morning, half the village had seen them. The priestess emerged from her home and drew a circle of salt around the square. She lit 6 candles, black, white, red, and 3 the color of soot. Then she spoke only once. "They're not here for vengeance. They are invitations." The children were the first to change. Not die, not vanish, sleepwalk. They would rise in the night, silent as shadows, and drift toward the windows, toward the direction of the river. Some whispered in their sleep, some hummed. But one, Mai, the carpenter's daughter, was found standing in the middle of the square at dawn. A veil had been placed over her face. Not by her parents, not by any hand they could trace, and when they removed it, she did not blink. She simply said, in a voice not her own, "I'm ready." They began to keep watch. Fathers took turns guarding doors. Mothers whispered prayers into their children's hair. But the procession continued every night without fail. And each time they passed, another girl would begin to murmur in her sleep. Another veil would appear folded beneath a pillow or nailed gently to a doorframe. Each veil carried a name, some of the living, some long since dead. Tam knew what it meant. He'd felt it since that night by the river's mouth, the weight in his chest, the dust in his throat, the way his dreams always ended at the bend. He knew Nian was near, but she was no longer alone. She was leading them. He followed the procession once, stayed far back, lantern in hand, though its light felt dimmer than usual. He walked until the village disappeared behind him, until only the soft shuffle of bridal feet and the breathless hush of the veils ahead remained. Then they stopped, all of them, as one. In the clearing just before the mouth of the river, beneath the hanging limbs of trees too old to still be alive, they turned, not toward him, toward a small pond. There, in the water's reflection, Tam saw it, a wedding. Hundreds of brides, no grooms, and one girl, veilless, eyes open, standing alone at the altar. Nian. But her dress was no longer white. It was made of ash. Then the procession began to hum. It was not a melody. It was the sound of wind through burial cloth, of fire licking the edge of a scroll, of memory folding in on itself. It was a song without notes, a lullaby for forgetting. Tam fell to his knees. When he woke, it was morning. The field was empty, but his shoes were filled with soot. The priestess confirmed it the next day. "They're not here for us. They're here to finish the wedding." "What wedding?" Tam asked. "The one no one stayed for." "The one from before?" She nodded slowly. "The one that never ended." The procession was no longer only at night. By the 4th day it appeared in the morning mist, by the 7th at midday. Sometimes they walked through walls, sometimes they drifted through doors already locked. The villagers learned not to move when they passed, not to speak, not to look directly at the veils. To do so meant dreaming again and waking with ash in your lungs. The final sign came on the 13th night. A mirror in the village square cracked from within, not shattered, peeled, as if the reflection inside had clawed its way out. And in the shards scattered across the cobblestones, each villager saw the same thing, their own face, veiled, and behind them, a hand resting gently on their shoulder. The ashen procession was no longer a haunting, it was a summoning, and someone, something, was counting down, bride by bride, step by step, until the final vow was fulfilled, and the river, at last, would be quiet. There are weddings that echo with music, and there are weddings that echo with silence. This one echoed with nothing. Tam awoke lying in water, not wet, floating, except there was no sensation of cold, no pull of current, no sound of splash or wind, just stillness. And above him, a pale gray sky that flickered like breath held too long. He stood, feet pressing into what felt like marble, though it shimmered like moonlit water. His clothes were dry, yet he smelled of river silt and incense smoke. Then he saw it. Ahead of him, stretching across the horizon, a wedding pavilion. Old, grand, crumbling in some places, perfect in others. Half-sunken pillars carved with faces worn smooth by water. An aisle made of driftwood and bone. Petals of ash falling gently from nowhere at all. And waiting beneath its arch, veiled in silver, neon. She did not move, only watched, her face hidden beneath a veil too heavy to sway. Tam's breath caught. He walked forward. No one else was there. No guests, no priest, no drums, no music. Only him and her, and the soft sound of veils fluttering in places they shouldn't be. As he reached the final step, he noticed the pews, each row filled with skeletons. Not dry, not dusty. Perfect. Preserved. Their robes had faded to threads, but their hands still held bouquets, crumbled lotus pods, thorned vines, bone combs. Some had their mouths sewn shut with red thread. Others wore bridle rings around their necks like collars. One reached out as he passed, its hand brushing the air near his wrist, but Tam didn't flinch. He understood now. These were not guests. They were witnesses. Neon raised her hand. A flicker of flame appeared between her fingers, tiny, pale blue, dancing like a forgotten candle. Then she placed it on a stone between them, the altar, and spoke without lips moving. "You came late." "I came," he whispered. "You left me at the bend. I was afraid. Are you still?" He looked at her, really looked,
and saw that beneath the veil was not sorrow, but expectation. She held out her hand. In her palm, the ring made of braided reed, now blackened with soot. Tam took it, placed it on her finger. The flame on the altar flickered, then turned black. At once, the pavilion breathed. The pillars groaned, the pews creaked, and the skeletal witnesses turned their heads in unison toward the river. From the mist came a sound, not music, but chanting, low, guttural, circular, as if a vow were being repeated in an ancient language that no longer belonged to humans. Tam felt it seep into his bones. His heartbeat slowed. His breath fell still. He looked at Nian, and she removed her veil. She was beautiful, not in the way people describe beauty with symmetry or softness, but in the way fire is beautiful when it consumes everything and asks for nothing. Her eyes were gray, rimmed with gold. Her mouth moved, but no sound emerged, only the ripple of a name through the mist. Tam's. Then, from behind them, footsteps. Soft, bare. Another bride entered the aisle, and another, and another. The procession had come. They filled the pavilion, brides from every century, every forgotten village, every story lost to the water. And they began to hum, not mournfully, but calmly, peacefully. Tam felt his hands grow lighter, his feet less solid. He looked down and saw that he no longer cast a shadow. He was no longer in the world that remembered his weight. He had crossed, not into death, into the vow. The altar flame pulsed one final time, then vanished. Nian stepped back, Tam stepped forward, and as their hands met, the river itself, above them, beneath them, around them, paused. Time folded inward, the mist thickened, and the pavilion sank. Not quickly, not violently, just gently. Above the surface, the villagers felt a shudder beneath their feet. Lanterns swayed. Chickens refused to cluck. The fog deepened. And then came a stillness unlike any before. The ash river stopped whispering, just for a moment. And when it resumed, it sounded different. Not like mourning, not like hunger, but like completion. The priestess, sitting alone with salt scattered around her knees, wept without knowing why. In her mind, she saw them, Tam and Nian, standing at the altar of a world no one else would ever see again, and she whispered, "The wedding is done." In the water that night, villagers found one last veil floating toward the mouth. White, clean, dry, folded perfectly, and tied around it a reed ring.
The villagers were the first to feel it, not with their skin, but with their dreams. They all dreamt the same thing, a slow rising from beneath the silt, a stirring of fabric, a veil lifting from stone. No cries, no screams, only the sound of breath after holding it far too long. And in every dream, she stood, the river bride. She was not Nian. She was not Shen. Not any one bride the village had mourned or forgotten. She was all of them. The weight of every vow, every name,
every broken thread woven into one figure that stood where the river met the sky. Her veil was no longer soaked in ash. It shone, not gold, not white, something in between, like the shimmer of moonlight on old bones. She rose not from water, but through it, and the river opened for her, like lungs inhaling, like memory clearing a path for what could no longer be buried. When she stepped onto the bank, the grass curled backward. When she breathed, the mist fell silent. The first to see her was the blacksmith's son. He had wandered from his home after midnight, drawn by the sound of bells. But there were no bells in the village, not anymore. He said she stood beneath the old ferry post, barefoot, arms outstretched, not calling, receiving. And when he blinked, she was gone. But in his palm he found a petal made of ash, folded into the shape of a ring. The next morning the river was still, not quiet, expectant. Lanterns, left unlit, spun gently on their strings. Salt lines cracked across thresholds. And the priestess, long silent, finally spoke. She has risen, and now she will choose who remembers. The river bride walked only when unseen, yet her footprints were found in soot upon rooftops, in dew across mirrors, in the center of pillows where sleeping girls had once dreamed of floating. One woman claimed to see her reflection nod back in place of her own. A man found his wedding ring replaced with braided grass, soaked and steaming. And at the well, the water turned briefly white, not with milk, with veil threads. She was no longer searching, she was gathering. Brides came to her, not in flesh, but in shadow. They emerged from trees, from doorways, from the places where silence grows thickest, each one veiled, each one humming. And as they met her on the banks, they knelt, not in worship, in recognition. Then came the voice, not in ears, in water. The river began to hum, not whisper, not scream, hum. A low, endless sound that pulsed beneath the ground, rose through the floorboards, trembled behind teeth. It said, "Remember me, bind me, bring me home." The villagers gathered. They had not done so in months, not since the fog began to move like memory, not since children began waking with soot in their mouths. But now they stood in the square. Each held a candle, each one unlit. The priestess emerged holding the old bridal ribbon, the one that had tied Neon's veil, the one burned but never buried. She dipped it in the river, held it up. It shone. And then from the bend she came, the river bride, veil lifted, eyes open, skin the color of smoke curled around pearl. She did not walk, she glided, and behind her hundreds followed, brides without names, without tongues, without graves, but they sang. Oh, they sang. The song had no words, only memory. Only the weight of every vow ever whispered and never fulfilled. It wrapped around the village, soft as silk, heavy as grief. She stopped in the center of the square, looked at the priestess, held out her hand, and in a voice like wind scraping bone, she said, "No more waiting." The priestess stepped forward, old, fragile, unafraid. "I remember you," she whispered, and bowed. The river bride placed her fingers on the priestess's eyes, and when she removed them, the old woman wept. Not tears, ash. Then the bride turned, faced the river, and lifted her hands. The veiled procession stepped into the water, one by one, without sound, without fear. Their dresses vanished beneath the current, their songs dissolved into ripples, and at last the river bride followed. She stepped into the ash river not as a spirit, but as a promise kept. The mist rolled back, the lanterns steadied, and for the first time in years, the river stopped humming. It was quiet, not gone, just at peace. That night the villagers lit candles without salt. Children slept through dusk, and couples held hands not from fear, but from memory of what had been lost and what had been returned, because the river bride had risen, not for revenge, not for blood, but for remembrance. And now that she had it, she could rest.
There is a fire the river does not like, not the kind that roars, not the kind that warms, but the kind that ends things, the kind that severs, the kind that remembers. On the 14th night after the river bride rose, the priestess lit her final altar. She had prepared it for years, hidden beneath floorboards, fed only the driest herbs, the oldest oils, and salt mined from the land before the river's name was cursed. In the center, she placed a box wrapped in black thread. Inside, the first veil, the original, singed at the edges, stained with tears, folded around a broken reed ring, still damp with memory. And she knew what had to be done, not to destroy the river bride, but to unbind her. She waited until the moon was gone, no wind, no owl, no sound. Then, with hands that had lit hundreds of rituals, she struck the flint. The fire caught, slowly. It hissed first, as if the veil resisted. But flame eats silence faster than sorrow, and soon the black thread began to curl, the white turned gray, and the veil wept. Not with water, with voices, dozens, hundreds. A chorus of brides murmuring through smoke, repeating their vows. I do, I will, I waited, he never came, we danced beneath the flood. Their words twisted upward into the night sky like incense, sweet and bitter. The veil was speaking as it burned. The priestess did not flinch. She whispered a final incantation, one only passed from blood to blood. What was stitched shall unthread. What was promised shall rest. Let the ash return to sky. Let the water sleep. And then she stepped back, just as the flame turned blue. Far across the village, the river shivered. The mist rose thick and fast. The trees leaned away from the banks, and every mirror cracked. Not shattered, but split, as if sighing under weight too long carried. Lanterns flickered, then extinguished, all at once. The veil was almost gone. Only the ring remained, blackened, crumbling, defiant. The priestess reached for it, and it dissolved in her palm, leaving behind only soot. But when she looked down, the soot had curled into a single symbol, one she knew, one she had seen long ago on the scroll buried beneath the altar, the symbol of a broken vow fulfilled. The ash river moaned, not angrily, like breath finally released from lungs too long held. And from the bend, where the brides had once gathered, the veil that floated above the water began to glow. It lifted, spun, and fell apart into threads of light, each one soaring into the sky like fireflies set free. The river bride appeared one last time. Only a few saw her. An old man gazing through a cracked window, a child cradled in her mother's arms,
the boy who had followed the procession but never spoke of it again. She stood at the center of the square, where the fire had died, where the altar still smoked. Her veil was gone. Her dress was gone. She wore only light. She turned, faced the river, raised her arms, and vanished. No scream, no sorrow, no trace. Only a wind that rushed outward and then in, as if the world had breathed her back into itself. The priestess collapsed that night, peacefully, a smile on her lips, ash beneath her fingernails. She was buried with no veil, no salt, only a ribbon placed on her chest embroidered with the word, free. From that night on, the river was different, still cold, still deep, still sacred, but no longer hungry, no longer whispering. When the wind passed over its surface, it did not call names. It hummed, softly, like a lullaby made from smoke, like something that had loved too long and finally let go. And when the next girl in the village was wed, she wore red, not white, and she danced beneath lanterns that did not float away, but returned, one by one, to the shore. Because the veil was gone, burned, released, and the river, at last, could forget. The river was quiet, but not gone. It moved slower now, like a dream that forgets itself before morning. Its waters clear, its voice low. But deep beneath its surface, something still stirred. A memory, a promise, a rhythm. And when the moon turned full again, the village heard it. The music. No flutes, no drums, just the soft sound of bare feet brushing through water, and a whisper that pulsed like a heartbeat. One more dance. It began at the bend, where the veil once returned, where neon once stood, where every vow made and broken had circled back. Mist rolled in, soft, gentle, and through it came the figures, not brides, not spirits, memories. They were faceless, weightless, moving like echoes with shape. Each one stepped forward onto the river's surface, not sinking, gliding. They twirled, they bowed, they wept without tears. The river did not resist them, it held them, as if it too remembered the vow. At the center of it all stood her, the last bride. Neon, yet not neon. A reflection of every woman the veil had ever touched. Hair drifting like ink in water. Dress stitched from the threads of every forgotten promise. But her eyes were her own. Soft, knowing, still waiting. Tam stood at the edge of the river where the procession had once passed. He was older now, not by years, but by weight. He carried the silence of things unspoken, of dreams half-lived. But his hands, they remembered her. His feet, they remembered the dance. And as the veil of mist parted, he stepped into the water. He did not sink. He was not pulled. He simply moved toward her, toward memory, toward the dance that had waited far too long. She turned as he approached, tilted her head. No veil, no barrier, only recognition. They touched palms, and the water beneath them glowed. Then slowly they danced, not in circles, not in steps taught or rehearsed, but in waves, each movement a vow, each breath a release. She leaned, he followed. He bowed, she rose. And all around them the other brides faded one by one, like lanterns drifting toward dawn. Their dance complete, their sorrow spent. The villagers watched from the banks, not afraid, not mourning, only listening. Because though they could not hear the music, they felt it, in the soil, in the trees, in the hush of the sky. The river was not just watching, it was remembering. As the dance slowed, Neon placed a hand on Tam's heart, and for a moment he closed his eyes. When he opened them again, she was light, not gone, not erased, just freed from form. She shimmered like a veil unspun, like steam rising from an offering bowl. And with one final step, she turned to mist. Tam remained standing. He did not weep. He bowed his head, and the river whispered its last vow to him. You stayed. That night, the ash river glowed with a light no one could name. Not fire, not moon, but something earned. And in the morning, the water was still again, the bend untouched, the mist dispersed, the veil never seen again. Years passed. The village remained, quiet, older, but alive. Children played by the banks. Lovers lit lanterns that no longer drifted upstream, and brides married in colors of their own choosing. Some still whispered the legend, others let it go. But the river no longer asked. It had danced, it had remembered, and now it could rest.
It ended not with thunder, not with screams or storms or fire. It ended with silence, the kind of silence that settles over a field just before snowfall, the kind of silence that comes after a name has been spoken for the last time. The river had whispered for generations, but now it simply breathed. People noticed first in small ways: a window that no longer fogged with soot, a basin of water that didn't ripple in the night, a girl who woke without ash on her lips for the first time since her birth, and the priestess, now buried beneath a stone marked with salt and thread, was remembered not for warnings, but for peace. The ash river still flowed, but it no longer murmured names, no longer twisted lanterns against the current, no longer offered back what it had taken. It had let go. Tam lived quietly near the bend, alone but not lonely. He built boats no one asked for. He carved rings from reeds and let them float freely, never naming them. Each morning, he placed a stone on the water and whispered, "Thank you," not to Neon, not to the river, but to the memory that had held them both. One autumn morning, the villagers found something strange, not frightening, just unfamiliar. The riverbank had shifted overnight, not eroded, not broken, but reshaped, as if someone had smoothed it with careful hands. And there, pressed into the soft mud, was a single footprint, bare, delicate, facing away from the water. They said it was hers, The final step, the one she never got to take. The river bride had finished her dance, and now she had walked on. In time, the story changed. Children told it differently. They said a girl with a silver veil once married the river, that she wore a dress made of clouds and had lanterns for eyes. Some said she still appeared at dawn, walking just beyond the mist. Others claimed she left gifts, rings of ash, folded petals, tiny mirrors that never cracked. But no one feared her, not anymore. She was a blessing, not a warning, a reminder of what happens when love waits too long and is finally answered. Eventually, people forgot her name, but the river did not, and though it no longer whispered aloud, its stillness held her story. In the way the current paused before turning, in the way the reeds bent gently without wind, in the way every reflection looked just a little deeper, as if listening. The last time Tam was seen, he sat beneath the willow by the ferry crossing. Eyes closed, hands folded, a veil of sunlight resting on his shoulders, and beside him a single folded ribbon burnt at the edges. They buried him beside the priestess. No stone, no lantern, only a reed ring placed in the dirt, tied with ash-colored thread. And on the day of his passing, the river stilled for 1 full hour. No ripples, no mist, just silence. And in that silence, peace. Because some stories are not meant to echo forever. Some stories whisper only long enough to be heard, then rest. And when the ash river stopped whispering, it did not forget. It simply healed.